So this is the Samsung Galaxy S25 Edge, and I've had it for a little over 7 days, and here is the hard truth about this phone. So what is up, guys? Nick here, helping you to master your technology. And let's start with the very big elephant in the room right away. Everybody wants to know the battery life. It's the main topic of discussion with this phone, mostly because everyone knows that Samsung threw a thin 3900 milliamp hour battery in there, and that is not the silicon carbon battery style that they could have maybe invested in and got this still thin, but also gave us much larger capacity. And what that has translated to is a phone that definitely drains much faster than the S25 Ultra. As a matter of fact, you would think with this large phone you're going to get maybe a better battery life, but no, you actually get small phone type battery life in a larger package. So if you're okay with something like an iPhone 16, a Galaxy S25 type battery life, and I'm talking about the base models with their smaller cells, stuff like this phone is pretty close to these devices in the battery life. But compared to other large phones, this one definitely is very noticeable. But here's the thing. After using it for this a week, I've been really going back and forth in my mind about who is this going to be okay for. And I'm going to tell you a couple of people. If you drive and you use wired CarPlay or wired Android Auto, which this one would be, your phone's charging on the way to your destination. You're going to be topping up on the way to work. So that's already going to take care of a lot of your battery issues. Number two, if you work in an office at home and you're a home worker, you charge up at home whenever you feel like it. So again, not an issue. If you're on the go, it's 2025. There are a ton of different battery solutions. Like you can attach to the back of this. You can bring a small battery pack if you need that extra capacity. It's not really like there's charging almost everywhere. Not saying we want to go to that, but the only person who's really going to dislike this battery life and really it's going to be the deal breaker for them is the power user who's spending multiple hours on screen, especially like people who are like doing a lot of video streaming, like if you stream live videos or you're doing intensive gaming, like you love to play games on your phone, Call of Duty, you know the drill, PUBG. If you're playing extended sessions, this is a horrible choice for you. But for everyone else, I don't feel like it's a deal breaker if you really want this thin and light form factor. Even though you're going to see some battery tests on YouTube of people showing how horrible it is, they're doing extensive drain tests. Those are not indicative of real world use. They don't add up. The fact of the matter is I found that in my use, the main thing that was really draining is I was doing heavy video rendering or watching sessions, which is what I was doing. Every 2 hours, I was doing some video streaming for 2 hours. I was losing about 20% every 2 hours. So I'm probably looking at about 6 hours, 5 to 6 hours screen time, and this phone is going to be needing a charge. But that's a lot of screen time, I would say. 6 hours screen time, like if you're doing stuff throughout your day, that's going to be enough. Another one that would probably drain this very fast is GPS without being on a charger. So if you're going to use this in your car, GPS, you got a phone holder or in your bike. You definitely want to bring a battery pack if you're on a bike or something. But if you're in a car, you'll want to charge it while using GPS. So the next thing I want to talk about is the thin factor. I'm hearing a lot of, oh, we didn't ask for a thin phone. There actually are a lot of people who wanted a thin phone. I was actually one of them. I got sick and tired over the years of using heavy phone after heavy phone. And honestly, I've been always going in between. You've been seeing my switching videos where you're like, oh, this guy's just going to switch again. Well, that's because over time I start to get annoyed with the clunky, large, bulky phone feel, but I still wanted a big screen, but I would have to go down to something like an iPhone 16 Pro or a 10s back in the day or something smaller. I would always be switching between them because sometimes I wanted that light form factor. So this is actually pretty cool that you have a large screen and you have it in a thin and light package. I just love that. Now, actually, I think I had a budget phone a long time ago that was super thin like this, but it was like a really slow, cheap phone. I don't even remember the brand, but it was not flagship. This is now flagship, and we have a super thin form factor with a high main sensor, which was high megapixel main sensor, which was the right decision, because if I'm going to get anything, I want the best sensor, my main sensor, to be the best one. And they gave us 200 megapixel. So this has been paying off. This thin and light selling form factor has been paying off. Now, to be fully transparent, I traded the Z Flip 6 for this phone because the Z Flip 7 is on the way. That only has a 100 milliamp hour battery. And I tend to prefer slab style phones anyway. I think they're more practical. But this is something that, again, you've probably heard it before, but literally you have to go to the Best Buy or you have to go to the store and feel this in hand. It just feels like incredible. It feels like a feather in your hand. It reminds me actually of how light, like back in the day, the iPhone SE was, the 2016. Those small, tiny phones, how light those phones were, but you're getting it in a large form factor. So I do think there's a place in the market for these devices. For sure, I think a lot of people are going to be buying the Air later this year. They're going to love that thin form factor. And mostly because when you're sticking this into a bag or a purse day to day, you really tend to notice it day after day, how your hand never hurts at all from using this heavy, how light it feels in your pocket, like it almost disappears. It's just great. Like the weight of this phone and the lightness, the thinness of this phone, it's just absolutely phenomenal. And you just, it's just something that you don't have to, like, it's a speck on paper, but day to day, it tends to add up. You feel it in your day to day. So it's one of those intangibles. You'll have to go try this out for yourself. And you might have heard that, but that is the truth. You literally do have to feel this in your hand. There's no way on a camera I could show you, because on camera it's just going to look like any other thin phone, and you're just going to have a perspective of like, oh, that just looks like a cheaper version of it. You can make an opinion you want. You have to use this phone to really feel what the person is trying to convey to you through the camera. So one thing I do have to say, though, that is a con of the thin and lightness, but we're looking for a con here, but you're buying this phone for the thinness. But I'm still going to tell you what I thought about it. It doesn't feel, after using it a couple days, it doesn't feel as premium as the Ultra. Like, I'm starting to understand what people say about a heavier phone does feel more premium. I'm tending to agree with that. This phone with a case on it kind of felt a little bit cheap. I'm not gonna kid around with that one. So with the case on, so you have to use this without a case to feel the aluminum, to make it feel premium, unless you get a nice premium case. But honestly, I feel like cases, they do protect the phones, but they're kind of ruining the feel of the phone. Like, this is one of those phones you don't want to use a case, but you do want to protect it because it's still over $1,000. So maybe the solution is a good skin or something like that. But this is one with a case, especially if you get a cheaper case, is not going to feel great. So definitely, I would say if you are going to get a case, invest in a super thin case, one that definitely feels premium. So maybe I'll get a case from one of these brands and cover it, one of my favorite options or something like that. But definitely, that's something I did notice. I also noticed that this phone, while it does feel similarly light to something like the S25, this is the regular S25. Don't assume that just because it's lighter that it's like going to feel much smaller at 6.7 inches versus the 6.9. This phone still is a reach up to the top. It's still a big phone. It's a big, thin, light phone. So if you still want one-handed experience, while I do think one-handed experience has improved for this, you don't get like those weird, like heavy feel when you're like about to drop the phone because it's so heavy, but it's still improved over 6.9 on the Ultra, but it's still not a super easy one-hand phone. So still go with the regular S25 if you're looking for that one-handed lightness. You're still going to like that. Another thing I wanted to mention was, I feel like at the very corner of this phone, I don't know what it is, maybe because the glass doesn't spill over the edge, it doesn't feel super comfortable to hold. As a matter of fact, if I can recall, I feel like back in the day, those curved Samsung phones actually felt better in the hand sometimes with the way the edges felt. But definitely, I can kind of feel it digging into the palm right here a little bit. So to me, while it was super lightweight, I actually felt like wearing the case that I did purchase for this phone made it felt more comfortable, like the edges, but not more premium, but more comfortable, if you will. So this phone, I feel like they could work on how comfortable it feels in the hand. Just something I noticed. And I want to talk about a couple other phones that I've been thinking about this past week with this, after using this phone. The OnePlus 13. Why am I thinking about this one right here? Well, here's the reason. Because OnePlus has made a very thin phone, not quite as thin, but definitely you can see it's a very thin phone as well. But they were able to stuff a 6,000 milliamp hour battery in there. So I wish Samsung would have took the OnePlus 13 approach with this carbon silicon battery in there, and it made it much longer battery life. So I feel like they could do that in the future, which would just really take this up to the next level. Another thing, surprisingly, I've been thinking about is my iPhone. Just how much of a brick this phone feels like now. Like, I'm not even kidding. I don't even want to use the 16 Pro Max right now in terms of like a daily driver, just because of the, just because how heavy it feels by comparison. So this phone has actually made me very excited to see what Apple brings with the iPhone 17 Air. And I don't care about the leak cases and all that. I want to see the phone itself. I want to feel it in hand, because now that I've seen this, I know that that's the type of phone you're going to have to get in hand and feel it in hand before you make your final decision. So the next sacrifice everybody keeps whining about is the cameras. Now, if I go over here to what we hear them complaining about, it's going to be the zoom. But here's the thing. 4x, 4x, 10x, everybody has been using iPhones forever with this type of regular up to 10 times zoom. So what's the issue here? You know, it still does the job. Of course, we're not getting telephoto. I like telephoto zoom just as much as the next guy. But if I go over here and you see, at least Samsung put their highest quality main sensor on here, which is the best thing, because that's what I want to use the most, the main sensor. I get the best quality out of my main sensor. We can also still do log, 4K 60, 8K video. So I'm not mad about the camera. Yes, would I like to have seen a third camera for zoom? Yeah, that would have been nice. And I feel like they'll pull it off in the future, but I'm okay with it. The camera has been fine for me. It's still not ultra good, but you know, it's fine. It gets the job done. I'm not mad at this camera. It still feels like a flagship phone camera with a sacrifice. This phone also made me think about these foldables. I feel like when they're unfolded, like this is the OnePlus Open Apex, they're super thin. You see the OnePlus Oppo folding phone. Look at this, is like the slab style phone of these folded phones, but opened. So if you like this super thin form factor of these unfolded foldables, but you want it just a regular phone that thin, there you go. Also, this is kind of as thin as like something like one of those iPad Pros that just came out, the M4s that came out last year. So it's giving you that option as well. Another great thing is that this phone is durable. It will not snap in half if that's what you think, because it's thin. Now, it's got a good internal structure. In addition to that, this phone right here also does not get super hot. So those aren't sacrifices. You thought you were going to get a super toasty phone because it's so thin. Nope. Samsung thought about that as well. So that's going to be partly due to the very efficient chipset in here. And this also has 12 gigs of RAM. So performance, I don't even want to mention it too much. It's blazing fast, just like the other Samsung phones. So you have no issues with that. It's going to run excellent. Also, having the QHD resolution on here makes the phone screen tack sharp. So it has got the high-end Samsung stuff here with the QHD plus resolution. There was shutter lag present on the camera. I found I was trying to take some photos and I was moving and it took a second. So it still does exhibit some of that shutter lag that a lot of Samsung phones. It's not just to this one, but they need to work on that. And I do have to say though, overall, after a week, I've been thinking this phone is probably not better for most regular consumers than maybe the base S25s, just because they're going to want better battery life. But if you know you're that type of person who's been wanting a thin, light flagship, this is 100% for you. And I'm pretty sure the person who's actually going to buy this, not the people you see online criticizing it, already are well aware of what they're going into when buying it. It's like they buy a smartwatch. They know the smartwatch is not going to last as long, but they want the features from it. A person buying this knows that they want the thin and light form factor, and they know that they're going to have to charge a little bit more, but they probably also know that I'm okay with that because I want that thin and light form factor. It's kind of like you buy the S25 Ultra and you're like, I know that I'm going to be using a thicker and heavier phone, but I also know that I want a big battery life, and I know that I want S Pen and I want everything in the kitchen sink. Then you buy your Ultra. Not everybody likes this phone though, even though you You may like it. Some people want a small phone. They don't want this big brick, and they're well aware that they get better battery life on this, but they still don't want it. You get what I'm saying? Like, people know what they're getting into when they get this phone. So don't just believe, don't just not get it if like it's something you really want just because somebody said the battery is a little bit weaker. Just adjust your habits, charging, screen time, and you'll be fine with this product. You truly will. So I did buy one of those cheap cases on Amazon, those little clear cases. I'm not leaving a link. This is a regular case. But you can see that the S25 Edge with this just becomes a normal phone thickness. Actually, maybe slightly thinner still. Yeah, just about a normal thickness with a case, but still not as heavy. So even with a case, while it does add grip so you don't drop this phone as much, and that's something that to note, you might drop this a little bit if you're not used to this thinness. That is something I noticed as well. The case definitely helps out with the grip, and it doesn't really add too much thickness. So you'll still feel like you're rocking a very light phone, even with a pretty thin case on here. And another thing I've been thinking about this phone over the past week is that it definitely would have probably been better served in bringing also a smaller package of this. So I would imagine a super thin, lighter, smaller phone. You would say, well, that's already the S25. Well, not quite. This phone is a little bit heavier, a little bit thicker. So I would say that the Edge in a smaller form factor option, I think would have been very good as well. And people would have known with a smaller phone, that's what I expect, a little bit less battery life anyway. But it's because a large screen, they probably want the big battery life here. I also felt like the volume rocker placement was kind of high on this phone, so the reach is going to be up there for some people. So do keep that in mind. It's not like right down here, like where Nothing puts their volume rocker on the Nothing phones 3A. So definitely up there on this phone. I also didn't like this 5G antenna thing right here. It's not as clean looking as I would like, but up at the top you can see pretty clean. And one other thing I wanted to mention is that I am happy that this phone even came out, because it shows that Samsung, while it is calculated risk, at least they are willing to take a gamble at something. They brought the Fold years ago. Now they're trying their hand at this. At least they're trying to bring something different. That's more than you could say for some other brands out there. So I definitely do have to applaud them for that aspect. Just trying it, even if it flops, like at least it was something to try, you know. That shows that we're not just going to see the same old forever. So this is what Samsung used to do. They used to bring new things. So I would like to see them continue that move to bring new things to the market. It is definitely pretty fun to see. All right, so the truth of this phone, wrapping it up, this phone feels like a somewhere in between the Samsung Galaxy S25 Ultra and the S25 Plus, but not quite as good in the battery life as either of those. You get the S25 Plus's screen size, screen quality. You don't get the anti-reflective properties of the Ultra, but you get the Ultra's main camera sensor. You get a price tag that is somewhere in between the two. You get the 12 gigs of RAM, the 8 Elite, just like them. And honestly, this phone is not really worth its high price tag. If you want to talk about spec for spec, the Ultra you can find at the same price online. So definitely, I don't think it's worth it when you compare it spec for spec. There are better phones out there. However, if you want a truly light and astonishingly thin phone, you've been wanting a large light phone and you are okay with a slight trade-off in having to charge just a little bit more, this phone is definitely way more impressive to hold, way more impressively thin, and still does 99% of what, well, 90% of what the Ultra does anyway. So it does have a place. I just think it's not hitting with the main consumers because the battery life. It really probably is the deciding factor here. But the sacrifices this phone makes are probably not worth it to the average consumer, but for the specific kind that I've been talking about throughout this video who knows what they want, this phone is definitely worth it. It's been fun to use, and I'm not returning it. I'm keeping it because I just like using the lightness. I really do. It feels like a feather in your pocket with that performance to match, which has been really fun to use. It really has been. So I'm going to compare this when the iPhone Air comes later this year, and that's the hard truth about the S25 Edge. It's not for everybody, but it's definitely pretty nice phone here overall. So let me know your thoughts, comments, concerns, questions down below in the comment section. Thumbs up if you enjoyed it. And if you picked up an S25 Edge, consider sharing your experience with the community. It helps people out in furthering their research into it, whether they want to plop down the money buying one of these. So Thank you very much for watching. Nick here. Be sure to be well. I'll catch you all in the next episode, and peace.